Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and with the launch of patch 11.05, which brought with it a number of class changes, especially to my current main, the class of Rogue, I think it's time for some updated Rogue guide, starting with one of the most popular specs of this expansion, Assassination Rogue, which is easily in the S tier popularity when it comes to raids, dungeons, and literally everywhere else within the War Within, and it continues to reign as the king spec heading into the patch 11.05. Now, because this is a longer video, since it is a proper guide for the spec of Assassination, I will have chapter marks down below so you can skip around to all of the different sections of this guide. Or if you want to be able to come back to this video to then get a refresher on a specific portion of this video, you should be able to utilize the chapter marks down below to navigate around accordingly. This guide video is primarily going to be adding on and exploring some of the newer stuff coming out to the spec of Assassination Rogue, but I will have some helpful material in the description of this video if you're brand new to the class of Rogue and maybe this is your first foray into the spec of Assassination specifically, plus a bunch of other links like a written version of this guide, which you can find on our Discord channel, which you should definitely check out. It's going to be a long one, so let's dive into it as soon as possible. Right before that though, if you want to see more guides for the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So as you watch this video, I do hope you either check out the original video guide for Assassination for Season 1 of War Within, or check out our written Discord guide for this class, because both of those are a lot more detailed and go into a little bit more granularity behind the class of Rogue, especially when it comes to newer players. However, this update for 11.05 is going to assume that you either have been playing Assassination Rogue so far in War Within, or have very basic knowledge of the spec. If this is a brand new spec, I definitely would check out the written guide and the original video, which I'll have linked both down in the description below. But otherwise, I mostly want to use this video to highlight what is new and different for the spec of Assassination Rogue. And the first thing you'll notice is you can actually play a Drakthir as a Rogue. Drakthir get access to a couple more class options that I wanted to test them out, and they've actually been kind of fun. Depending on the Mythic Plus dungeon, the knockback ability with the Bringing by Fate is actually really cool. It's very interesting for rogues to have a knockback, and something I'm definitely not used to. Also, being able to glide has been a very interesting mechanic, especially in some of the dungeons where there's a knockback effect or a displacement effect, which you can just bypass completely. And that just feels kind of broke to some degree. As for the actual rogue changes, we see a number of talent changes as well as ability changes. Starting with some of the ability changes in the passive tree, Cut to the Chase is now a much better talent than where it was. That previously needed you to have Slice and Dice active before it started to gain an effect, where first you need to establish the Slice and Dice with your common points, and then you would use Envenom in order to maintain the ability the rest of the time. But now you can just build common points with Mutilates, press Envenom, and it automatically applies Slice and Dice to your character. So if you're someone who still has Slice and Dice on the bars, it might be a good idea to free up a keybind and replace it with any of the other rogue keybinds. This is probably one of the biggest quality of life things. I personally don't really know what I'm going to put in place of Slice and Dice right now. I feel like my rogue keybinds are set up. I'm just so used to where Shiv is, where Kingsbane is, where all my other abilities are. And for me, I don't really know exactly where to put it. But if you're someone who struggled managing keybinds with rogues, this ability can leave your bars and you never have to think about it again. Another ability that got a big quality of life update is Feint, which is now an ability that's off the GCD. That means you can go through your entire burst rotation, combat rotation, and you can actually press Feint in between of those buttons. So you don't have to slow down a rotation in order to use the ability of Feint. You can actually weave it in between, which is a fantastic use defensively. Besides this, Assassination Rogues also saw a number of talent changes. First things first, the playstyle of Echo and Reprimand is completely gone out of the game. So that whole annoying mechanic has been replaced with another mechanic called Supercharger. The way that Supercharger works for Assassination is after you use Shiv, it supercharges a combo point, basically allowing your next finisher to be stronger as if it consumed 2 additional combo points. It is very straightforward, and you don't have to do anything mechanically for it. So as you build combo points against an enemy target, you press Shiv, and now one of your combo points glows blue. That means when next time you use a finisher, instead of counting as if you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 common points, it'll act as if it used a 9, so 2 additional common points on top of it. Now this means abilities like Envenom that hit pretty hard on 7 common points will hit harder, scaling as if they hit for 9. So it actually will hit harder. This also works for things like your Rupture, which will have a longer bleeding effect. Things like Crimson Tempest, which will have a longer bleed as well as more damage behind it. But it also works for other talented abilities and passive effects, which there are not that many for a spec like Assassination, but things like Poison Bomb also gains benefit from you being able to consume additional combo points. You can either put 1 point into supercharges, so only one finisher gets empowered, or 2 points for 2 finishers, and then further down you can either go into Force Induction, which can increase the effectiveness of the supercharged combo points, or give you free procs on the next Mutilate with Echo and Reprimands, which isn't a talent that right now Assassination Rogues heavily invest into. We'll put at least 1 point into supercharger in most cases, but it is a mechanic that's just basically going to amplify our finishers that doesn't necessarily affect our rotational damage. It just makes us hit harder. It's just a nice little buff overall. And that's going to be probably the biggest talent change in terms of the class talent tree. In terms of the spec talent tree, we have Lethality, which now procs automatically whenever you drop below 30 energy. This does mean if, let's say, you're trying to save a charge of Lethality during the tail end of your Kingsbane with Shiv, you may want to be a little bit more careful with the energy and not spam it out so you're just dropping below 30 energy. Talents like Subterfuge got upgraded. Normally, all this talent does is, after you break stealth, it just grants you like this 6 seconds of, or up between 3 and 6 seconds of momentary stealth-like state. However, it now also extends the duration of other effects that play around stealth. So things like Indiscriminate Carnage gets a longer window of up to 12 seconds. Same thing with Master Assassin and Improved Garrote. All those stealth-based talents now get longer duration thanks to Subterfuge, which makes for a very interesting and compelling bit of gameplay, especially in content like Mythic Plus dungeons. Subterfuge isn't getting wide play, but it's definitely getting a lot of play at some of the higher-end M+ content. As for the spec talent with Assassination, there haven't been too many changes, except for one that's now going to cause us to want to invest a talent point into a talent called Twist the Knife. Twist the Knife allows Envenom's duration to be increased by 2 seconds, so it basically makes it much easier to maintain the actual buff element of Envenom. Envenom not only deals great single target damage, but also grants you a buff that allows your poison application chance to be increased by 30%. And together with the talent of Rapid Injection, it also buffs the damage of your Envenoms. So what Twist the Knife does is it allows you to have 2 of these Envenom buffs to overlap at the same time. So as I spend Envenom and I build some comp points for a second Envenom, you can actually see it doubles up. So you have a higher chance to apply the damage, and you can actually have the Envenom do 20% additional damage. But it's overlapping buffs, so it's going to be 2 separate buffs that are being tracked at the same time. So that is something that you might actually have to watch out for and manage yourself. It is a very interesting change that allows Envenom to basically be used at all times in terms of at least maintaining a single buff, because it extends it by quite a bit. But being able to double overlap it, especially inside of your big burst windows, I think that's where a lot of the fun is going to come from playing Assassination Rogue. It just makes you a lot burstier. It is a very strong talent, and it seems to be getting quite a bit of play no matter what type of build of Assassination you play. Outside of the class talents, we also have some hero spec adjustments specifically for Fatebound, like things such as Deliver Doom, which now has a scaling component. So instead of it dealing additional damage when you're fighting a single target, but no additional damage as soon as you're fighting more than one target, it now has a 30% damage increase for the flip coin, but it loses damage the more targets are around you, so it has a bit of a scaling factor, making it a little bit better. Then Edge Case now flips the 2 coins, causing them to land as both heads and tails. And that one procs now when you press Deathmark instead of after Deathmark then a finisher, which makes it a little bit better rotationally. But as of right now, Fatebound is still not that strong as a hero spec compared to Deathstalker. For the most part, most rogues are preferring to play Deathstalker when it's numerically better. 2, it feels really fun because you can play around Darkest Night. It's really bursty. It's probably the best part of this hero spec in general. Although Fatebound is an alternatively easier, more passive playstyle if that is what you prefer. Though with Fatebound, you do have to find a way to change up your talent, so you have to pick up Cold Blood in order to fully maximize the Fatebound gameplay. That isn't recommended by most players right now when it comes to the current season of Assassination in 1105. There may be some builds in the future that might come out of it, but as of right now, I do recommend you to play around Deathstalker because it has significant numerical number advantage to it. Besides this, we can also take a look at and do an updated version of the builds that you'll be playing as Assassination Rogue for 1105. It looked like there was going to be a lot of build variety at the very beginning of the PTR testing for 1105, but then those builds kind of just shrunk. So there's a lot of very, very powerful builds, but there's a lot less variety for Assassination. So this is the builds that you would want to run. I'll have those builds with a link down below, so if you want to actually import these builds directly, you'll be able to find the links to these builds in the description of this video, but also in our written version of the guide as well, where you'll be able to take the actual link of the build and you'll be able to copy and paste it yourself. And to import it, you'll go to the import section and actually just Control V to import it directly. Name it whatever you like a raiding build or something, and then you should be able to start using these builds immediately without having to tinker and slot every single talent point individually. So the first is going to be the raid single target build, which is going to dip 1 point into a supercharger, 2 points into lethality, because right now the ability of Kingsbane for some reason is doing some double dipping with lethality. So rogues are utilizing this right now. It's very, very good, and numerically just a little bit better than putting more points into supercharger, since supercharger doesn't necessarily really affect assassination as aggressively as it does for specs like outlaw, or the potentially what it could do for specs like subtlety. We put 1 point into it because it's nice, especially with Deathstalker, and if you can get that full Darkest Night combo, but it's not something we really fully invest into or play around with. We just gotta put a point into it because it is a little bit better when it comes to just being able to consume more combo points when it comes to our Venoms. Then of course we put a point into Lethality. We still play around improved ambush and deeper stratagem, and in the capstones for the spec tree, artillery precision, Kingsbane, as well as dragon temper blades for double poisons, and we do take points out of vicious venoms in order to make sure Twisted Knife has a point available for it as well. Then we have the raid cleaving build, which is exactly the same single target build as we saw earlier, but we just adjust the talent from internal bleeding, and we put a point into caustic spatter instead, which causes us to allow our nature abilities, so Kingsbane, our poisons, envenoms, poison applications from auto attacks, all of those things will cleave to nearby targets, splashing onto them. That will deal uncapped AoE damage with a soft cap of 5 targets. So it's fantastic. It allows us to have great priority damage while cleaving everything around us. As for the Mythic Plus builds, we still are playing Deathstalker, but we adjusted a little bit. We go with things like Tricks of Trade for utility. We pick up Tight Spender instead of the improved ambush. You could also go Numbing Poison. Both of them are good between a Traffic Poison and Numbing. Numbing does see a little bit more play in Mythic Plus because that could actually help improve your tank survivability greatly. Outside of this, we pick up things like Crimson Tempest, and we still play around the 4 capstones of Kingsbane, Dragon Temper Blades, Indiscriminate Carnage, and Sudden Demise. Though for this build, we don't go into Twisted Knife for Mythic Plus, although there are some builds right now that are experimenting with it to see if it could potentially work out pretty well. But right now we mostly play like a more standard version as to what we played before 11.05 update. However, there is another version of the M Plus build, which is the Subterfuge build, which is another alternative playstyle that actually utilizes some of the newer talents, like 2 points into Subterfuge, to give things like Indiscriminate Carnage 12-second opener window, allowing us to cleave bleeds like Rupture and Garrode to so many targets from the get-go. It is incredibly powerful if you drop in a big bleed cleave AoE playstyle, and it kind of makes you feel like a assassination rogue with a little bit of outlaw in you. You don't put points into Supercharger, however, if you are trying to invest points into Subterfuge, and that is something for players to really play around with in terms of gameplay here. And you're more than welcome to play around with these talent points as much as you want to. This is an experimental build more than anything, but I did see a lot of play at the high end of content. Besides this build also does pick up points into Twist the Knife to get even better single target damage for even more cleave, so it does get a little more AoE with Subterfuge, but it's able to reallocate some points to pick up Twist the Knife to get even more single target output. Though we still play things like Crimson Tempest, but we are going to pick up all the other talents that do synergize together with the 2 points into Subterfuge. Next, let's talk about stats and optimizing your character. In most cases, I really think you should start utilizing if you're just going back to War Within or if you haven't started this already. If you're serious about playing a rogue in Season 1 of War Within, you should start really utilizing raid bots as well as sims to better optimize your character. In my original guide video, we went over exactly how to get raid bots up and running, but also there's a link to that in our detailed Discord written guide, so definitely check out the link to that as well. But I do want to get you guys started. If let's say you're just going back to 11.05, you want to figure out what stats you want to be looking out for when gearing out your character, this is going to be your current stat distribution. Agility is going to be the best stat when it comes to getting brand new pieces of gear. So in most cases, if an item has more item level and it has agility on it, in most cases that piece of gear is going to be significantly better for you. Otherwise, we still are going to be prioritizing Critical Strike as well as Mastery. Both of them are very even with one another and are pretty much equal in terms of their both value. Your Mastery increases your damage of your blades and poisons, which basically increases the damage of majority of your abilities, and Critical Strike gives you more chances to crit, but also crit plays around resource generation for Assassination because of talents like Seal Fate. Whenever we generate common points and with Critical Strike, we generate additional common points per Critical Strike. Past that, Haste is going to be our third best stat. It isn't the greatest stat, but it is a stat we want a couple of points into it, with the last stat being Versatility, which is a great defensive stat, but it doesn't benefit us as greatly when it comes to pure single target output. When it comes to the gear, we do have some new content added as of this newest update, specifically when it comes to the new Blackrock Depths Raid Dungeon. And there's been some sims flying around to see if any of the newer items being added to this raid could potentially be part of your best in slot set as an Assassination Rogue. The early sims suggest that these items are all good, but they're not necessary to be your best in slot pieces. So most of the best in slot gear you'll still be able to get from Season 1 War Within content like Mythic Plus dungeons as well as the Nuremberg Palace raid. Some of the items that are more notable that are definitely worth mentioning is if you can't get your hands on the Regicide Dagger, that is probably one of the better daggers that's available currently in the season. Assassination doesn't have a lot of opportunity for best in slot mastery crit daggers in the game as of this moment, so Regicide is our only best in slot option, or any stats that are very similar that at least have mastery or critical strike on them. However, when it comes to trinkets, Assassination actually has quite a lot of solid options. The first best in slot trinket is going to come from the Dungeon of Grim Batol of Skarden's Grace. This thing deals a ton of damage and synergizes perfectly with your death mark window. Since that is 2 minutes, the trinket is also 2 minutes. It provides you a big juicy buff of mastery, which further amplifies that burst window. Another trinket that has proven itself fairly well is the Deadeye Spyglass, because it grants you, as long as you attack at a singular target, additional critical strike chance as you attack that target, stacking up to 5 times. Critical strike is a great stat. It's one of your better stats right now, great for resources, which makes Deadeye Spyglass one of the better trinkets that's available for this current season. When it comes to crafted gear, right now embellished items are not nearly as powerful as they were in previous expansion on Dragonflight, but they still are fairly helpful in the current season of War Within. So if you're trying to make some crafted gear Assassination Rogue, your best two crafts are going to be actually belt as well as bracers. Both of them should be crafted with the embellishment of Dawnlight threading that allows you to get additional critical strike chance while you're above 80% health. Next, I want to comment on the rotational changes and the gameplay adjustments as of the patch 11.05. For the most part though, if you've been playing Assassin's Rogue so far in War Within, not a lot has changed in terms of basic day-to-day gameplay. The only thing you don't need to do anymore is manage slice and dice. So you're still putting bleeds on the targets like garrotes as well as ruptures. And you want to have about 5 to 6 of these bleeds in AoE and just maintain those bleeds in pure single target. The only thing that's going to feel different is not having Echo and Reprimand for single target when it comes to managing your finishers. You just don't have those early finishers that you can utilize anymore since Echo and Reprimand is gone. So all you need to do is just wait until you have 5 or more common points and then spend those common points on those finishers. Even Supercharger, we basically ignore the mechanic completely because it's just more efficient for us just to focus on building common points up until about 5 in order to be able to use our finishers. The one thing I did notice is Twisted Knife does give you a much longer Envenom uptime, which is awesome. I'm actually really enjoying this one, and being able to overlap Envenoms, but especially with how aggressive Assassination Rogue plays currently in the Season 1 of War Within, I think allows you to benefit quite greatly from that type of a playstyle, and it makes those Kingsbane windows much easier to manage. And getting those big Envenoms together with a Supercharger, if you can line them up together really well, can also be quite a lot of fun. When it comes to AoE content, also not a lot changes there either, but now you have much easier management of slice and dice, which means essentially no more management of slice and dice, which is probably the best part. Though in Mythic Plus, I did notice that Feint, the ability defensively, being OBGCD is a huge benefit when it comes to your overall survivability, especially when you have some dungeons where enemies will try to focus target you with a damage over time effect. Being able to feint while running the Talent of Elusiveness for additional defense can be quite handy when it comes to just overall reducing your damage taken. It makes you feel a lot more survivable, and the fact that you don't have to choose between a damage ability and a defensive is a fantastic change that I think every rogue wanted to see for quite a while. Subterfuge in particular for Mythic Plus, I feel like allows you for more mass bleed spread and mass AoE bleeding, which feels great to play with. I'm a big fan of that one in particular because it just allows you to cleave everything down as if like you're an outlaw rogue, but you don't actually have to play outlaw with the roll the bones or anything. You can just sticking to that good old assassination, blades, poisons, and just being able to spread all those bleeds on multiple targets. It's just super nice. Allows you to have a very granular opener to make sure that everything is rotting at the same time. It really taps into this whole damage over time fantasy of assassination rogues, and just watching an entire pack of 25 mobs melting all at once to corrodes and ruptures, it's just something super satisfying about it. But it definitely feels like it's improved, though not a lot of changes in terms of like what's actually new and what you could be doing differently. There's not a lot really there. As for the consumables that you want to play in this season, not a lot has changed. Your weapons are going to be enchanted with Authority of the Depths, your cloak should be enchanted with Winged Grace, while your chest should be enchanted with Crystalline Radiance. Your bracer should be enchanted with Armored Avoidance in most cases, though some players do prefer Leech for fights where there's going to be a lot of trickle out damage, like if you find yourself rotting out or damage over time enemy abilities. You should imbue your legs with a Stormbound Armor Kit. Your boots should be enchanted with Defender's March. Your ring should be enchanted with the Radiant Critical Strike, although you can swap out to Cursed Haste if for some reason you are very behind on your haste numbers, though to get better accuracy regarding your ring enchants, you should always sim your character. As for consumables, those haven't changed either. You're still running Flask of Alchemical Chaos with Tempered Potion as your main unused potion, but also Algari Healing Potions, those really do come in handy. Ironclaw Vessel seems to be a solidly performing option when it comes to all forms of endgame content. Crystallized Augment Runes aren't necessary, but if you are doing some more harder content, you need a little bit extra primary stats, those can be helpful, although the buff from those does go away when you die in combat, so they can be quite expensive. Feast of the Midnight Masquerade is generally the food that you'll be using. Culminating Blasphemy will be necessary in at least one of your gem slots, though the rest of your gem slots can be imbued with a Masterful Ruby, which grants you additional crit as well as mastery. And with everything being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope all of you did enjoy it. If you did enjoy this guide or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community if you want to get access to the written version of this guide or have any more rogue questions. I'm hanging around Discord all the time. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.